Beneath the ruins of the Commonwealth, hidden far below the fractured streets of Boston, the Institute built something it believed was superior to the wasteland above it. While most factions in Fallout struggle openly with scarcity, radiation, and violence, the Institute exists in pristine white corridors lit by sterile overhead lights. Its laboratories hum quietly. Its crops grow without contamination. Its scientists speak calmly about the future. And yet, among all of Fallout's factions, the Institute may be one of the most unsettling, precisely because it does not see itself as evil. The Institute is made up of elite scientists, engineers, geneticists, physicists, roboticists, individuals who survived the Great War by retreating underground and dedicating themselves to scientific preservation. Over generations, that preservation shifted into ambition. Their stated goal is simple: rebuild humanity through technology. But their definition of humanity does not necessarily include everyone. The Institute views the surface world as chaotic and inefficient. To them, the Commonwealth is not a society to cooperate with, but a failed system to observe. They refer to its inhabitants as surface dwellers, a subtle but deliberate linguistic distancing. Over time, that distancing becomes moral justification. One of the Institute's most controversial achievements is the development of synthetic humans, commonly known as synths. Early models were mechanical and easily distinguishable from humans. Later generations, particularly Gen 3 synths, became virtually indistinguishable from organic humans. These synths possess memories, personalities, and emotional capacity. They bleed, they dream, they fear death, and yet the Institute considers them property. Synths are manufactured for labor, infiltration, and experimentation. Some are deployed to replace key figures in surface settlements. Others are used internally as servants and security. When a synth develops self-awareness and attempts to escape, the Institute categorizes it as malfunctioning hardware. The existence of the Synth Retention Bureau, tasked with hunting down escaped synths, demonstrates how firmly the Institute maintains this stance. Rather than question the morality of creating sentient beings for servitude, the Institute focuses on retrieving its assets. Kidnapping plays a central role in the Institute's operations. Surface dwellers disappear without warning. Entire families are left confused and afraid. In some cases, children are abducted to serve scientific goals. The most well-known example is the abduction of Sean, who was used to develop the genetic template for Gen 3 synths. The Institute does not justify this as cruelty, it frames it as necessity. From their perspective, short-term suffering is acceptable if it leads to long-term advancement. This utilitarian philosophy allows them to commit acts that would be unthinkable to most wasteland communities. Murder becomes research, replacement becomes progress, surveillance becomes stability. Their technological achievements are undeniable. The Institute perfected teleportation through molecular relay systems. They developed hydroponic agriculture, immune to radiation. They created autonomous robotic systems capable of rebuilding infrastructure. But technological brilliance does not equate to moral clarity. The Institute's isolation over generations fostered an echo chamber. Scientists born underground rarely experience surface life firsthand. Their perception of the wasteland is filtered through reports and experiments. Without shared hardship, empathy weakens. Unlike factions such as Caesar's Legion or the Enclave, the Institute does not rely on open brutality. Its violence is quiet, calculated, hidden behind clean glass walls and academic language. When settlements are destabilized by synth infiltration, the Institute calls it data collection. When a human replacement causes paranoia in Diamond City, the Institute considers it collateral. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the Institute is that it genuinely believes it is saving humanity. In conversations with its leaders, particularly Father, there is no admission of cruelty, only frustration that the surface refuses to understand their vision. The Institute imagines itself as the rightful heir to pre-war civilization. It seeks to return to a world defined by scientific dominance and controlled advancement. But it ignores a fundamental truth. The old world collapsed under similar arrogance. Its obsession with purity of knowledge mirrors the Enclave's obsession with genetic purity. Both factions believe they represent the next stage of humanity. Both view others as inferior variables. Yet, unlike the Enclave, the Institute does not openly seek extermination. Instead, it seeks replacement. Replacing humanity one synth at a time is a quieter extinction. The Commonwealth fears the Institute not because it sees it, but because it cannot see it. The uncertainty of who might be synthetic creates distrust among settlements. Neighbors turn on one another. Suspicion becomes routine. This psychological destabilization may not be the Institute's primary goal, but it is a direct consequence of its methods. Ultimately, the Institute represents a version of evil that does not wear armor or wave banners. It does not burn villages in daylight. It operates in silence, convinced of its righteousness. And in the quiet laboratories beneath the earth, where human minds design artificial ones without hesitation, the Institute continues to prove that some of the most disturbing factions in Fallout are not driven by rage or chaos, but by calm certainty that they know better than everyone else. Long after the bombs fell, and the world was reduced to fractured settlements and irradiated deserts, a faction remained that believed it had never truly fallen at all. The Enclave, the self-proclaimed continuation of the pre-war United States government, did not see itself as another post-war power struggling for relevance. It saw itself as the rightful authority of a nation that still existed, even if only in theory. Unlike many factions that formed out of necessity or desperation, the Enclave was prepared. It consisted of high-ranking government officials, military commanders, corporate leaders, and intelligence operatives who anticipated nuclear war and secured their survival in advance. Hidden within remote installations such as the Poseidon oil rig in Fallout 2 and Raven Rock in Fallout 3, the Enclave preserved advanced technology, military infrastructure, and a rigid ideological framework. At the heart of that ideology was genetic purity. The Enclave believed that anyone exposed to radiation, which, by the time of the post-war era, meant almost everyone, was irreparably tainted. Even individuals who appeared physically normal were, in the Enclave's eyes, contaminated by trace radiation and mutation. Only those who had remained fully isolated from the wasteland were considered truly human. And so the Enclave defined itself not simply as survivors, but as the last legitimate humans. This belief shaped every action they took. In Fallout 2, the Enclave developed a modified strain of the Forced Evolutionary Virus, FEV, designed not to create super mutants, but to eliminate all irradiated life. Their plan was chillingly direct: release the virus into the atmosphere and wipe out every living organism that did not meet their genetic standard. This included wasteland settlers, ghouls, super mutants, and even communities that had managed to rebuild with relative stability. Unlike the Institute, which hides behind scientific advancement, the Enclave does not disguise its intent. It is open in its belief that the wasteland's population is disposable. The oil rig, serving as their primary base in Fallout 2, symbolized their detachment. Surrounded by ocean, isolated from the mainland, the Enclave's leadership could look down at the ruins of America and see not tragedy, but opportunity. President Dick Richardson, who leads the Enclave during Fallout 2, openly explains their goal to the Chosen One if confronted. There is no remorse, no hesitation. He speaks of genocide as restoration. This unwavering conviction makes the Enclave uniquely disturbing. In Fallout 3, remnants of the Enclave reappear under President John Henry Eden, an artificial intelligence claiming to be the voice of America. Eden broadcasts patriotic messages across the wasteland, framing the Enclave as saviors who will purify the land. The tone is calm, almost reassuring, but beneath that calm lies the same extermination plan. The Enclave seeks to seize control of Project Purity, a water purification system in the capital wasteland. Their intention is to introduce a modified FEV strain into the purified water supply. Anyone who drinks it, meaning virtually the entire population, would die if deemed genetically impure. The scale of this plan extends beyond battlefield conquest. It is systemic elimination. The Enclave's military presence reinforces its ideology. Clad in advanced power armor, including the Hellfire variant, Enclave soldiers present themselves as inheritors of America's former strength. Their equipment surpasses that of most wasteland factions. Their vertibirds dominate the skies. Technological superiority becomes symbolic of moral superiority in their worldview. The Enclave's rhetoric frequently references rebuilding America, but their definition of America excludes nearly everyone alive. Unlike Caesar's Legion, which attempts to create order through brutality, the Enclave does not aim to govern the wasteland's people. It intends to replace them. This absence of integration makes their goal fundamentally different from other antagonistic factions. Even the Legion allows conquered populations to survive under its rule. The Enclave does not. In their ideology, coexistence is impossible. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Enclave is its bureaucratic normalcy. Terminals and logs within their facilities read like standard government documentation. Reports are filed. Orders are processed. Policies are enacted. Genocide is organized administratively. This echoes the horrors of pre-war authoritarian regimes, where destruction was implemented through paperwork and procedure rather than chaotic violence. The Enclave also demonstrates a recurring theme in Fallout. The old world did not deserve restoration. By preserving pre-war leadership structures, the Enclave preserved the same hubris that contributed to nuclear annihilation. They learned nothing from the Great War except how to survive it. Even within their ranks, fractures appear. In Fallout 3, Colonel Augustus Autumn disagrees with President Eden's genocidal plan. He prefers authoritarian control over total annihilation. This internal conflict reveals that even among extremists, there are degrees of extremity. However, both paths involve domination. The Enclave's downfall in both Fallout 2 and Fallout 3 underscores the series' rejection of purity ideology. In each case, a lone protagonist disrupts their plans. The oil rig is destroyed. Raven Rock is detonated. But fragments remain. Terminal entries and scattered survivors suggest that not all Enclave members were eliminated. Rumors persist of hidden bunkers, surviving commanders, and splinter groups. This lingering possibility enhances their mystique. The Enclave's most disturbing trait is not just its violence, but its self-assurance. It never questions its authority. It never doubts its definition of humanity. In a world already devastated by absolutism, The Enclave doubles down. Where other factions adapt to the wasteland's new reality, the Enclave attempts to erase it. And in their pristine command rooms, filled with American flags and polished steel, they continue to embody one of Fallout's darkest warnings, that the most dangerous forces are not those who embrace chaos, but those who believe, with complete certainty, that they alone deserve to decide who gets to survive. In the Mojave wasteland, where fractured republics and independent settlements compete for survival, one faction stands apart, not because of technological superiority or hidden laboratories, but because of its unapologetic embrace of brutality. Caesar's Legion does not pretend to be progressive. It does not disguise its cruelty behind science or patriotism. It openly builds its society on slavery, violence, and absolute obedience, and that honesty makes it deeply unsettling. Founded by Edward Sallow, who renames himself Caesar, the Legion draws inspiration from the Roman Empire, or at least a stylized interpretation of it. Sallow was once a member of the Followers of the Apocalypse, a humanitarian group dedicated to education and rebuilding. During his travels east of the Colorado River, he encountered tribes he viewed as fragmented and directionless. He studied ancient history and concluded that civilization could only be rebuilt through total cultural unification under authoritarian rule. His solution was not cooperation. It was conquest. The Legion's expansion began with the systematic destruction of tribal identities. Conquered groups were stripped of language, culture, and individuality. Their names were erased. Their traditions were forbidden. They were absorbed into the Legion's hierarchy or enslaved. Unlike the Enclave, which eliminates those it deems impure, the Legion assimilates, but only by obliterating identity first. Slavery is foundational to Legion society. Women are enslaved for labor and reproduction. Conquered populations are chained and forced into servitude. Male captives may be inducted as soldiers after brutal conditioning, but many are executed or worked to death. Crucifixion is a common punishment. In towns such as Nipton, the Legion leaves bodies displayed publicly. These executions are not hidden. They are theatrical. The purpose is deterrence through terror. This use of spectacle differentiates the Legion from more secretive factions. Where the Institute destabilizes quietly and the Enclave plots from behind sealed doors, the Legion sends a message with every conquest: resist and suffer visibly. Yet within its territory, the Legion does provide something rare in the wasteland: stability. Caravans traveling through Legion-controlled lands report fewer raider attacks. Trade routes are secure. Crime is punished swiftly and harshly. This paradox complicates the Legion's legacy. The security it offers comes at the cost of personal freedom, cultural diversity, and human rights. Caesar himself justifies his actions through philosophical language. He frequently references Hegelian dialectics, arguing that conflict between the new California Republic and the Legion will produce a stronger civilization. He frames his empire as a necessary stage in human evolution. But the reality beneath the rhetoric is simpler. The Legion thrives on control. Education is suppressed. Technology beyond basic weaponry is discouraged. The Legion intentionally avoids advanced medical equipment and firearms, believing reliance on technology weakens discipline. This rejection of technological progress contrasts sharply with factions like the Brotherhood of Steel or the Institute. The Legion's power is rooted not in machines, but in human conditioning. Recruits undergo brutal training. Weakness is punished. Compassion is viewed as liability. Loyalty to Caesar supersedes family, self, and morality. Women in Legion society are excluded from combat and leadership roles entirely. Their function is defined biologically. This systemic subjugation reinforces the Legion's rigid gender hierarchy. In Fallout, New Vegas, the player witnesses firsthand the consequences of Legion expansion. Towns are either absorbed or destroyed. Captives are enslaved publicly. Officers enforce discipline through intimidation. Yet, Caesar maintains a calm demeanor when encountered. He does not shout or posture unnecessarily. He speaks as though history itself validates him. This composure makes him more disturbing. The Legion is not chaotic. It is structured. Centurions command cohorts. Legates oversee territories. Orders flow downward through a defined chain of command. But beneath that structure lies fragility. The Legion's unity depends almost entirely on Caesar's personal authority. He is both ideological leader and strategic commander. His illness, a brain tumor discovered during New Vegas, threatens the stability of the entire faction. Without Caesar, the Legion risks fragmentation. This reliance on a single figure mirrors historical empires built around charismatic rulers. When the central figure falls, cohesion often dissolves. The Legion's most significant military objective in New Vegas is Hoover Dam. Control of the dam would grant them energy dominance and symbolic victory over the new California Republic. The battle for Hoover Dam represents more than territory. It represents ideological supremacy. If victorious, the Legion would extend its influence westward, imposing its system across the Mojave. And yet, for all its brutality, the Legion does not view itself as villainous. From its perspective, democracy breeds corruption, freedom fosters weakness, diversity creates division. By erasing choice, the Legion claims to eliminate chaos. The cost of that elimination is humanity itself. Compared to the Enclave's genocidal ambition, the Legion's approach may seem less absolute. It does not seek extinction, but transformation. Yet that transformation demands total submission. In Legion lands, dissent does not exist. It is extinguished before it can take shape. The disturbing element of Caesar's Legion lies not only in its cruelty, but in its partial success. Within its borders, order does prevail. Crime decreases. Roads are safer, but those roads are lined with crosses, and the peace they offer is silence. The Legion reflects a recurring Fallout theme. In the aftermath of catastrophe, some will choose freedom with risk, while others will choose control with suffering. Caesar chose control, and in the dry heat of the Mojave, where banners bearing the Bull of Mars flutter above conquered settlements, the Legion stands as a reminder that stability achieved through fear may endure, but it always leaves behind a trail of erased names and broken bodies, proving that some of the most disturbing factions are those that convince themselves brutality is simply the price of progress. In a world shaped by nuclear fire, most survivors learn to fear radiation. It burns, mutates, poisons, and corrodes. Entire cities are abandoned because of it. Water becomes undrinkable. Crops wither. Skin peels. Humanity adapts cautiously, building around it, hiding from it, medicating against it. But the children of the atom do something else entirely. They worship it. The Children of the Atom are a religious faction present across multiple Fallout titles, including Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. Their central belief revolves around Atom, a divine force embodied by nuclear radiation. To them, the Great War was not a tragedy, it was revelation. The bombs did not destroy the world, they unveiled its true nature. Radiation is not contamination, it is sacred. At first glance, the children appear eccentric, but harmless. In Fallout 3, they gather around the unexploded bomb in Megaton, praying to it, bathing in its glow. They speak calmly, with reverence. They offer sermons rather than threats. Their robes and rituals feel almost theatrical, but beneath that serenity lies something deeply unsettling. The children of the atom believe in division, the idea that nuclear detonation does not annihilate life, but multiplies it into countless new forms. According to their doctrine, when a person is consumed by atomic fire, they are split across infinite universes. Death is transformation. This belief reframes destruction as transcendence. The more radical splinter groups of the children take this theology further. In Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC, certain sects actively pursue nuclear detonation to bring about the Great Division. They stockpile warheads, they manipulate reactors, they prepare for annihilation not as tragedy, but as holy communion. This is where their faith crosses into existential threat. Unlike Caesar's Legion, which conquers for control, or the Enclave, which exterminates for purity, the children of the atom destroy for salvation. The Far Harbor branch of the children, led by figures such as High Confessor Tectus, demonstrates how ideology can radicalize over time. While some children seek peaceful coexistence, Tectus's sect grows increasingly militant. They view non-believers as obstacles to enlightenment. Far Harbor itself becomes a battleground of belief. The fog that blankets the island is already toxic and unnatural. Creatures mutated by radiation roam its forests. The children see this not as evidence of harm, but of Adam's creativity. This reinterpretation of mutation as blessing is central to their identity. Many members willingly expose themselves to lethal levels of radiation. Some appear physically unaffected, leading to speculation within the lore about genetic predisposition or divine intervention. Others become ghouls or suffer illness, which they interpret as spiritual trial. The psychological element of their belief system is striking. In a world where radiation is inescapable, redefining it as sacred provides comfort. It transforms fear into purpose. It gives meaning to suffering. The children of the atom are not merely delusional cultists. They are individuals who found structure in catastrophe. Yet their structure is built upon acceptance of annihilation. In Far Harbor, the sole survivor can influence whether the children detonate a nuclear warhead to achieve their Great Division. This choice underscores the faction's potential for catastrophic action. The bomb is not metaphorical, it is real, and they are willing to use it. Their rituals, language, and iconography reinforce their worldview. They refer to radiation storms as blessings. They describe nuclear reactors as temples. They speak of Adam's glow as divine embrace. Unlike the Institute, which hides underground to escape radiation, the children step into it willingly. This contrast highlights two opposing responses to apocalypse: control versus surrender. The children surrender. Their faith removes the burden of responsibility. If destruction is holy, then preventing it is heresy. This absolution makes them dangerous. The children of the atom also represent a critique of blind faith. Fallout consistently questions institutions that elevate ideology above empathy. Whether political, scientific, or religious, extremism leads to harm. The children's belief in division eliminates the moral weight of death. If dying in nuclear fire simply multiplies existence, then detonating bombs becomes a benevolent act. That reinterpretation is chilling. Not all members of the children are violent. Many simply pray, meditate, and coexist. Some offer assistance to travelers. Their communities can appear peaceful on the surface, but the presence of splinter groups willing to initiate nuclear destruction demonstrates how fragile moderation can be within radical belief systems. The Far Harbor arc especially emphasizes this tension. Tectus's leadership leans toward aggressive purification, while other members advocate coexistence. Internal conflict mirrors the broader themes seen across Fallout factions. Extremism grows when left unchecked. The children's aesthetic, glowing lanterns, chanting voices, irradiated shrines, creates an atmosphere of eerie calm. They do not shout. They do not charge recklessly. They wait. Faith does not require urgency. In this way, the children of the Atom differ from raider gangs or mercenaries. Their violence, when it occurs, is framed as sacrament. The disturbing element lies in their sincerity. They truly believe they are helping. Unlike the Enclave's calculated genocide or the Legion's overt brutality, the children of the Atom act from conviction that nuclear fire is divine will. In the aftermath of global devastation, they found a god in the ruins. And in the glowing green haze of their sanctuaries, where Geiger counters click like prayer beads and radioactive storms are greeted as miracles, the children of the Atom stand as a reminder that in Fallout's world, the most unsettling factions are not always those who seek power or control, but those who look at the end of the world and see not horror, but holy light. Among the factions of the Fallout universe, few are as recognizable as the Brotherhood of Steel. Clad in imposing power armor, carrying advanced weaponry, and speaking in tones of duty and discipline, the Brotherhood often presents itself as one of the wasteland's best hopes. They preserve technology. They fight super mutants. They battle synth threats. They bring order. And yet, particularly in its East Coast iteration under Elder Arthur Maxson in Fallout 4, the Brotherhood becomes something more rigid, more uncompromising, and far more disturbing than its polished armor first suggests. The Brotherhood of Steel began as a military remnant after the Great War, originally led by Captain Roger Maxson. Their founding belief was that advanced technology had caused the apocalypse, and therefore it must be preserved, controlled, and kept out of irresponsible hands. In earlier games, particularly Fallout 3, the East Coast Brotherhood under Elder Lyons softened this doctrine. Lyons believed in actively protecting civilians and distributing aid. But by the time of Fallout 4, that humanitarian approach has been replaced. Under Elder Maxson, the Brotherhood returns to strict orthodoxy. Technology is not to be shared. It is to be hoarded. Synths are not misunderstood beings. They are abominations. Super mutants are not tragic victims of experimentation. They are threats to be eradicated. This absolutism defines the East Coast Brotherhood's disturbing edge. Unlike the Institute, which manipulates quietly, the Brotherhood operates in the open. Their arrival in the Commonwealth is announced by the massive airship Prydwen, casting a shadow over Boston. Vertibirds sweep the skies. Knights march in formation. They do not hide their power. Their mission in Fallout 4 is singular: destroy the Institute and eliminate the synth threat. To many Commonwealth residents, this appears justified. The Institute's kidnappings and replacements have created widespread fear, but the Brotherhood's approach leaves no room for nuance. All synths, regardless of behavior, consciousness, or personal agency, are considered machines to be dismantled. The Brotherhood does not differentiate between Gen 3 synths who have escaped and built lives among humans and hostile Institute operatives. In their doctrine, existence equals guilt. This ideological rigidity extends beyond synths. Ghouls are viewed with suspicion. Super mutants are hunted without consideration for intelligence or individuality. The Brotherhood frames its mission as preservation of humanity, but its definition of humanity grows increasingly narrow. Their purist mentality mirrors the Enclave's, though less explicitly genocidal. The Brotherhood claims moral high ground through discipline and order. Their ranks are structured militarily: initiates, knights, paladins, scribes. Advancement requires obedience and loyalty. Doubt is discouraged. When Paladin Dance is revealed to be a synth, the Brotherhood's reaction illustrates the faction's internal conflict. Dance has demonstrated unwavering loyalty and valor. He embodies Brotherhood ideals. Yet when his synthetic nature is exposed, Maxon orders his execution. The player may intervene, but the initial response reveals the Brotherhood's stance clearly. Identity is irrelevant. Biology defines worth. This moment highlights the faction's core tension. The Brotherhood seeks to protect humanity, but refuses to acknowledge evolving definitions of it. The Brotherhood's technological hoarding also impacts the wasteland. Advanced weapons and armor are confiscated. Civilians are not trusted with high-level machinery. In some cases, settlements are pressured into compliance for the sake of protection. Protection becomes conditional. The Brotherhood views itself as the rightful steward of civilization's remnants. This self-assigned authority is rarely questioned internally. Members are trained to believe that only they possess the discipline to handle dangerous technology responsibly. But history in Fallout repeatedly shows that centralizing power invites corruption. Under Maxon, the Brotherhood's rhetoric becomes more aggressive. Speeches delivered aboard the Prydwen emphasize purity, strength, and the eradication of threats. The tone borders on crusade. The Brotherhood frames the conflict with the Institute as a holy war of preservation. Their uniforms, symbols, and strict hierarchy contribute to this image. To Commonwealth settlers, the Brotherhood appears almost mythic, armored knights descending from the sky to wage war. Yet myth does not guarantee morality. The Brotherhood's insistence on technological exclusivity limits collaboration. They rarely cooperate with local communities as equals. They operate above them. This superiority complex distances them from the people they claim to defend. Compared to factions like the Minutemen, who operate through local militia cooperation, the Brotherhood prefers centralized authority. Decisions are made at the top. Orders flow downward. There is efficiency in this structure, but there is also inflexibility. The destruction of the Institute, if achieved through Brotherhood alignment, is absolute. The underground complex is annihilated entirely. Research, data, and potential breakthroughs are lost. From the Brotherhood's perspective, this is necessary cleansing, but it raises a question. Is destruction always preservation? The Brotherhood's East Coast Division represents a shift from cautious guardianship to militant orthodoxy. They no longer merely safeguard technology, they dictate its use. Their power armor symbolizes protection. It also symbolizes separation. Encased in steel, they are physically and ideologically insulated from the world around them. Unlike Caesar's Legion, the Brotherhood does not enslave populations. Unlike the Enclave, it does not seek mass extinction, but its unwavering belief in its own moral clarity places it dangerously close to those extremes. The Brotherhood's fear of synth infiltration parallels the Commonwealth's paranoia. Yet instead of addressing fear with investigation, they respond with extermination. Their motto, Ad Victoriam, speaks to inevitable victory. Victory over whom? Over anything that does not conform. In the quiet hum of the Prydwen's engines, in the disciplined marches of armored soldiers across Boston's ruins, The Brotherhood of Steel's East Coast Division demonstrates how noble origins can harden into rigid dogma, and how a faction that begins as protector can, through certainty and exclusion, become one of the wasteland's most unsettling forces, proving that sometimes the line between guardian and oppressor is drawn not by armor or weapons, but by how narrowly one defines the word human. Long before raiders carved territories into the dust, before Caesar built his empire, before the Institute replaced neighbors with synthetic doubles, there was a corporation that quietly laid the foundation for much of the wasteland's misery. It did not march in armor. It did not broadcast speeches about purity or salvation. It smiled through advertisements and promised safety. Vault-Tec. On the surface, Vault-Tec presented itself as a humanitarian corporation. As tensions between the United States and China escalated in the decades before the Great War, public fear grew steadily. Nuclear annihilation felt inevitable. Vault-Tec stepped into that fear with a solution: an expansive network of underground vaults designed to preserve humanity. Families saw smiling Vault Boy posters. They were promised protection, food, and long-term survival. For many citizens, entry into a vault represented hope, but behind the marketing campaign was something else entirely. The majority of Vault-Tec vaults were not built simply to shelter people. They were constructed as controlled social experiments. Each vault tested a different variable: isolation, authority, chemical exposure, cloning, addiction, class hierarchy, hallucination, faith, forced competition, cryogenic suspension. The experiments were not accidents. Terminal entries across multiple Fallout games confirm that Vault-Tec deliberately designed these vaults with hidden agendas. Some vaults functioned as control vaults, meant to operate normally, but most were engineered to fail, or at least to destabilize. Vault 101 tested isolation under authoritarian rule. Vault 106 pumped psychoactive gas into its residents' air supply. Vault 95 rehabilitated addicts for 5 years before revealing a hidden stash of chems. Vault 108 overstocked weapons and experimented with cloning. Vault 112 imprisoned residents inside a virtual simulation controlled by a single man. The pattern is consistent. Vault-Tec wanted data. The corporation claimed that these experiments would prepare humanity for future space colonization, that understanding how populations behave under stress would be necessary for long-term survival beyond Earth. But whether that justification holds weight remains ambiguous. For many vaults, the suffering inflicted appears disproportionate to any practical research goal. The disturbing element of Vault-Tec lies in its indifference. Unlike factions formed after the war, Vault-Tec planned its experiments before the bombs fell. It exploited public fear for profit and then used its customers as test subjects. Parents signed up believing they were saving their children. Instead, they entered laboratories disguised as shelters. Some vaults were cruel in subtle ways. Others were cartoonishly malicious. Vault 12 was designed so that its door would not seal properly, exposing residents to radiation. Vault 11 forced inhabitants to sacrifice one of their own, annually under false pretenses. Vault 75 turned children into military test subjects. These were not mistakes. They were intentional variables. Vault-Tec leadership remained distant from the consequences. Executives operated from secure locations, insulated from the fallout, both literal and moral. Even after the Great War, hints suggest that elements of Vault-Tec may have survived. Observing the results from afar, the experiments reshaped the wasteland permanently. Entire factions trace their origins back to Vault failures. The Khans, Jackals, and Vipers emerged from Vault 15's social conflict. Necropolis formed from Vault 12's radiation exposure. The Lone Wanderer and Sole Survivor are direct products of Vault environments. Vault-Tec did not merely record data, it altered history. The corporation's aesthetic, cheerful mascots, bright jumpsuits, optimistic slogans, contrasts sharply with the outcomes of its experiments. That contrast amplifies the horror. Smiling posters advertised Vault entry as patriotic duty. In reality, Vault dwellers were variables in corporate research. Even vaults that functioned normally were rarely free of manipulation. Supplies were limited. Overseers were selected strategically. Backup systems were removed. Trust was weaponized. Unlike the Enclave, which openly seeks extermination, Vault-Tec's evil was bureaucratic. Contracts were signed. Budgets were approved. Designs were drafted. Suffering was engineered on spreadsheets. The most chilling aspect of Vault-Tec's legacy is its scale. While factions like the Legion or Talon Company affect regions, Vault-Tec influenced the entire continent. Hundreds of vaults dotted the landscape, each running its own experiment simultaneously. No single faction caused more long-term damage. Vault-Tec's actions also blur the line between pre-war and post-war evil. While many wasteland factions can attribute their brutality to desperation, Vault-Tec operated during relative stability. It had resources, time, and foresight. It chose experimentation anyway. The Fallout television adaptation further expands on Vault-Tec's role, suggesting deeper corporate government ties and long-term contingency planning. These additions reinforce the idea that Vault-Tec was not merely opportunistic, it was strategic. Some theories even speculate that Vault-Tec may have accelerated the Great War to ensure its experiments began on schedule. While never definitively confirmed in-game, the possibility aligns with the corporation's willingness to sacrifice lives for research. Vault-Tec did not react to apocalypse, it prepared for it. The psychological impact of its experiments reverberates through generations. Vault dwellers who survived often emerge traumatized, shaped by environments designed to manipulate them. Some vaults devolved into violence, others into insanity, a few into eerie stability, but none were untouched. The most disturbing realization is that Vault-Tec did not require hatred to function. It did not preach ideology or demand loyalty. It simply constructed environments and waited. In the end, Vault-Tec represents a different kind of horror than raider gangs or extremist armies. It embodies systemic cruelty, the quiet confidence of a corporation convinced that human lives are expendable in pursuit of data. And in the scattered vault doors buried beneath mountains and cities, sealed against a world that never asked to be tested, Vault-Tec's legacy endures as perhaps the most chilling faction of all. Not because it raged against the wasteland, but because it built the cages long before the world ever burned. In the capital wasteland, danger comes in many forms. Raiders attack out of desperation or cruelty. Super mutants roam in brute packs. The Enclave marches under banners of purity. But there is another kind of threat that feels colder, more transactional, and in some ways more unsettling. Talon Company. Unlike ideological factions driven by belief or grand vision, Talon Company operates for profit. They are a professional mercenary organization introduced in Fallout 3, identifiable by their black combat armor and tactical precision. They do not claim to rebuild society. They do not preach salvation. They do not promise order. They kill because someone pays them to. Talon Company stands apart from common raiders. Raiders are chaotic, disorganized, and motivated by immediate survival or sadism. Talon Company, by contrast, is disciplined. Their patrols move in formation. Their weaponry is standardized. Their equipment is well maintained. They resemble a standing army without a flag. One of the most unsettling mechanics in Fallout 3 is how Talon Company responds to the player's moral choices. If the lone wanderer gains positive karma, helping settlements, disarming bombs, completing altruistic quests, Talon Company begins sending hit squads to eliminate them. Doing good attracts professional assassins. This implies the existence of a wealthy benefactor or organization threatened by stability in the wasteland. Talon Company does not operate randomly. They target individuals who improve conditions for others. The identity of their employer is never explicitly confirmed, but in-game hints and fan theories suggest ties to shadowy political forces, possibly even remnants of the Enclave or other destabilizing interests. If true, Talon Company becomes more than mercenaries. They become tools of suppression. Their presence in the capital wasteland undermines attempts at rebuilding. Settlements that grow too stable may find themselves attacked. Caravans that prosper may be intercepted. Unlike Caesar's Legion, Talon Company does not seek territorial control. They thrive in chaos. Stability reduces demand for mercenaries. Peace weakens their business model. This economic motivation makes them disturbingly realistic. They are not ideologues. They are entrepreneurs of violence. Their headquarters, Fort Bannister, reflects this militarized professionalism. The fort is fortified, organized, and stocked with supplies. Inside, terminals reveal operational logs and communications that emphasize contracts and objectives rather than philosophical doctrine. Violence is a service provided. Talon Company soldiers often taunt their targets with calm confidence. They refer to contracts and payment, reinforcing that their actions are transactional. This detachment heightens their menace. Unlike raiders who may act impulsively, Talon Company operates strategically. They choose ambush points carefully. They deploy in squads. They pursue until the contract is fulfilled. The absence of ideology means there is no argument to counter. There is no moral debate to win. There is only a job to complete. In a post-apocalyptic world where morality is often blurred, Talon Company simplifies violence into commerce. The idea that someone is wealthy enough to fund continuous mercenary operations also suggests that power structures remain hidden in the wasteland. Talon Company may be the visible edge of a deeper network. This ambiguity amplifies their threat. The player never confronts a charismatic leader delivering speeches about destiny. There is no Caesar or President Eden equivalent. Talon Company's leadership remains faceless. Facelessness can be more frightening than fanaticism. It implies that destruction may be driven by convenience rather than conviction. Talon Company also serves as a narrative counterpoint to the lone wanderer. While the protagonist can shape the wasteland through choices, Talon Company attempts to suppress that agency. Doing good is not universally celebrated. It is punished. This dynamic reinforces Fallout's moral complexity. The world does not reward altruism consistently. Sometimes it retaliates. Compared to the Enclave's grand extermination plans or the Brotherhood's technological crusade, Talon Company's goals seem smaller in scope. They do not aim to reshape humanity. But in practice, their actions may cause just as much suffering. A hired bullet does not discriminate based on ideology. It ends lives regardless of potential. Their neutrality toward morality is perhaps their most disturbing trait. They will protect a settlement one day and raise it the next if the payment shifts. There is no code beyond compensation. This flexibility allows Talon Company to persist. When ideologies fail or leaders fall, mercenaries remain relevant. As long as conflict exists, there is profit. And in the cracked highways and ruined cities of the capital wasteland, where good intentions are met with sniper fire and contracts are signed in shadows, Talon Company stands as proof that some of Fallout's most disturbing factions are not driven by faith, purity, or conquest, but by something far simpler and far colder: a paycheck. In the ruins of the Commonwealth, there are raiders who steal because they are starving, raiders who attack because they have known nothing else, and raiders who fight simply because chaos is easier than rebuilding. But in Nuka-World, the violence takes on a different tone. It becomes organized, branded, themed. The raider factions inhabiting Nuka-World are not just scavengers surviving in the debris of civilization. They are structured gangs operating within the shell of a pre-war amusement empire. And among them, particularly the disciples, cruelty is not merely a means to survival, it is entertainment. Nuka-World, once a corporate paradise dedicated to sugary beverages and cheerful mascots, becomes something grotesquely ironic after the war. Its bright colors and carnival architecture remain, but the laughter is replaced by screams. The park is divided among three major raider factions: the Operators, the Pack, and the Disciples. Each represents a different philosophy of violence. The Operators are pragmatic. They are motivated by caps and control. Their aesthetic is sleek and controlled. They favor organized expansion and financial gain. Violence is a tool, not a passion. The Pack operates on dominance and spectacle. They embrace animalistic imagery, wearing decorated armor resembling beasts. Strength determines rank. They believe in visible power displays and territorial pride. But the Disciples are different. The Disciples are perhaps among the most disturbing factions in Fallout's universe, because they remove even the illusion of justification. They do not hide behind ideology or stability. They do not claim to rebuild. They kill for pleasure. Their leader, Nisha, is unapologetic. In conversations, she speaks calmly about the thrill of watching life leave someone's eyes. Torture is not collateral damage, it is recreation. Unlike Caesar's Legion, which uses cruelty to enforce order, the Disciples indulge in it for satisfaction. Their armor reflects their brutality. Jagged blades, dark tones, bloodstains left intentionally visible. Their headquarters within Nuka-World feels less like a strategic base and more like a shrine to violence. The alliance between the three gangs is fragile, held together only by the promise of expansion into the Commonwealth. The sole survivor, if choosing to side with them, can become Overboss, the leader uniting these factions under one banner. This structure reveals something deeply unsettling. Cruelty scales efficiently when organized. The Nuka-World Raiders do not merely survive within the park, they seek to expand outward. They establish outposts in the Commonwealth, forcing settlements into tribute systems. Those who refuse are attacked or enslaved. Unlike Talon Company, whose violence is contractual, the Nuka-World Raiders aim for territorial dominance. And yet, even among raiders, the Disciples stand apart in their depravity. Their philosophy strips away pretense. They do not talk about survival or progress. They revel in suffering. In a post-apocalyptic world where resources are scarce and danger is constant, violence can be rationalized as necessary. The Disciples reject rationalization. They treat brutality as identity. The Operators and the Pack may prefer strategic control or dominance displays, but the Disciples prefer blood. Their existence raises uncomfortable questions about human nature in Fallout's universe. When civilization collapses, what rises in its place? For some, it is order. For others, it is faith. For factions like the Disciples, it is unrestrained cruelty. Nuka-World itself amplifies this horror through contrast. The bright neon signs and faded mascots create a grotesque backdrop for torture and executions. Pre-war slogans, promising happiness, now hang above arenas of violence. It is capitalism twisted into chaos. The park's infrastructure allows the raiders to centralize power. Roller coasters overlook slave pens. Marketplaces operate under threat. Entertainment districts become arenas. Violence becomes spectacle. Unlike the Brotherhood or the Enclave, the Nuka-World Raiders do not claim moral superiority. They do not pretend to be saviors. Their honesty is brutal. If the sole survivor sides against them in the open season quest, wiping them out restores a form of moral clarity. But if the player embraces the overboss role, the Commonwealth becomes subject to Raider rule. This duality emphasizes Fallout's recurring theme: the line between hero and tyrant can blur. The Nuka-World factions are disturbing not because they hide their cruelty, but because they normalize it. The Disciples' lack of long-term vision makes them particularly dangerous. They do not seek to build an empire. They seek the next act of violence. Stability does not interest them. This unpredictability contrasts with Caesar's structured brutality or the Brotherhood's disciplined crusade. The Disciples thrive in volatility. In some ways, they represent the rawest expression of post-war humanity, stripped of ideology, stripped of long-term planning, reduced to impulse. And that rawness is unsettling. The Nuka-World Raiders show how easily power can be commodified. Tribute systems, expansion plans, and internal hierarchies mimic pre-war corporate structures. It is as if the amusement park simply changed management styles. Control remains the objective, only the methods shift. The Disciples' philosophy of pleasure-driven violence makes them arguably one of the most straightforwardly evil factions in the series. There is no hidden justification, no promise of order, just blood. And in the flickering glow of Nuka-World's carnival lights, where laughter once echoed through attractions now repurposed for suffering, the Raider Alliance, especially the Disciples, stands as a grim reminder that sometimes the most disturbing factions are not those who claim to reshape the world, but those who decide it is more fun to watch it burn, one scream at a time. Some factions terrify through spectacle. Caesar crucifies. The Enclave broadcasts. The Brotherhood arrives in an airship large enough to cast a literal shadow over a city. But there is another kind of fear in Fallout's world, a quieter one. The fear that the person standing next to you is not who they say they are. While the Institute itself operates as a centralized power beneath the Commonwealth, its most disturbing influence spreads above ground through infiltration. The concept of synthetic replacement, of humans being kidnapped, studied, sometimes killed, and replaced by near-perfect artificial duplicates, creates a unique kind of factional horror. Because once replacement becomes possible, trust becomes fragile. Gen 3 synths are biologically indistinguishable from humans. They breathe, they bleed, they age, they remember, though those memories may be implanted. They possess emotions that feel authentic even to themselves. The only way to confirm their identity is through invasive testing or death. That alone reshapes society. In Diamond City, paranoia spreads after incidents of suspected synth infiltration. Neighbors accuse neighbors. Families question each other. The execution of suspected synths becomes public spectacle. Fear becomes communal. This atmosphere does not require open institute presence. It thrives independently. Unlike Talon Company or the Nuka-World Raiders, who occupy territory physically, the Institute's shadow occupies minds. People begin to wonder, was that traitor replaced? Is the mayor still human? Is the stranger in the market watching too closely? Even if only a fraction of these suspicions are true, the damage is done. Trust is the foundation of any rebuilding society. Once fractured, it cannot be restored easily. The Institute may not intend to spread paranoia as a weapon, but the outcome is inevitable. Replacement for research or observation destabilizes communities. The most chilling examples are cases where replaced individuals behave slightly differently, colder, distant, more secretive. Families notice, friends whisper, but without proof, doubt lingers. This form of infiltration mirrors historical fears of spies and sleeper agents, but amplified. The synth is not just an ideological infiltrator, it is physically identical, and sometimes the synth itself does not know. Certain Gen 3 models are implanted with false memories and believe they are human. When confronted with evidence of their synthetic nature, they experience genuine existential crisis. This blurs moral lines further. If a synth believes it is human, feels human, and behaves human, what distinguishes it? The Brotherhood answers with elimination. The Railroad answers with liberation. The Institute answers with ownership. But the Commonwealth answers with fear. The paranoia surrounding synths leads to mob justice. In random encounters, citizens execute suspected infiltrators without confirmation. Entire settlements debate loyalty and identity. This atmosphere creates a faction of suspicion, not centralized like Caesar's Legion, not structured like the Brotherhood, but collective. The idea that infiltration could be anywhere reshapes behavior. Conversations become cautious. Leadership becomes unstable. Elections feel meaningless if a candidate might be artificial. Even the sole survivor is not immune to suspicion. Rumors circulate questioning whether they themselves might be synthetic. That level of uncertainty erodes reality. The Institute's shadow faction is not made up of soldiers in armor. It is made of doubt. From a narrative standpoint, this psychological impact may be more disturbing than overt violence. Open enemies can be fought. Invisible infiltration cannot be easily countered. The Commonwealth's fear of synths mirrors real-world anxieties about artificial intelligence and automation, about replacement not only of labor, but of identity. The Institute's ability to create fully sentient beings challenges the definition of humanity. But instead of fostering philosophical dialogue, it generates panic, and panic leads to cruelty. Synth refugees fleeing the Institute are hunted not only by coursers, but by civilians who see them as existential threats. The railroad attempts to relocate and protect escaped synths, but even that effort intensifies paranoia. If synths can hide successfully, then anyone could be one. This dynamic fractures alliances. The Minutemen attempt grassroots cooperation, yet they must constantly reassure settlers that they are not infiltrators. The Brotherhood's arrival escalates tension further. Their promise to eliminate synths appeals to frightened communities. In this way, the Institute's shadow strengthens rival factions indirectly. Fear becomes a recruitment tool. What makes this infiltration so disturbing is its quiet normalization. Over time, the Commonwealth adapts to suspicion. It becomes part of daily life. Trust narrows to immediate family. And even that is uncertain. The Institute may argue that its experiments advance science, but the social cost is immeasurable. A society rebuilding from nuclear devastation cannot thrive under constant doubt. The Institute's shadow demonstrates how power can destabilize without occupying territory or firing a weapon. And unlike the Enclave's overt extermination plan or Caesar's visible brutality, this destabilization lingers invisibly. There is no battlefield, no declaration of war, just the creeping sense that someone somewhere is watching and might already have replaced someone you know. In the dim streets of Diamond City and the quiet farmhouses scattered across the Commonwealth, where conversations lower at the mention of synths and neighbors hesitate before offering trust, the Institute's shadow proves that some of the most disturbing factions are not defined by uniforms or banners, but by the invisible fractures they create in the minds of those trying to survive, leaving behind a wasteland where the greatest fear is not death, but uncertainty about who is truly alive. Long before the Institute replaced citizens in the Commonwealth, before Caesar marched across the Mojave, before the Brotherhood turned its focus toward synthetic extermination, there was another faction whose vision for humanity was absolute. The Unity, led by a being known simply as the Master. The Unity stands as one of the earliest and most philosophically disturbing factions in the Fallout universe. Unlike the Enclave, which sought genetic purity through extermination, or the Legion, which sought order through domination, the Unity sought transformation, total transformation. The Master, originally a man named Richard Gray, was exposed to the Forced Evolutionary Virus, FEV, within the Mariposa military base. The virus altered him beyond recognition, merging flesh and machinery, expanding his intellect while warping his body into a grotesque, stationary form. But what the Master gained in physical distortion, he gained in clarity of purpose. He came to believe that humanity, as it existed, was flawed, divided, violent, prone to war. Nuclear devastation had proven that. His solution was not extermination. It was forced evolution. The FEV, when administered to humans, created super mutants, towering, durable beings immune to radiation, disease, and aging. In the Master's mind, these mutants represented the next stage of human evolution, stronger, unified, resistant to the very forces that had destroyed civilization. He envisioned a world without racial, national, or cultural division because individuality itself would be erased. The Unity was not simply an army of super mutants. It was a philosophical movement. Its members believed that merging into a singular evolutionary step would eliminate the weaknesses that doomed the old world. But there was a flaw. FEV sterilized most of its subjects. The Master either did not fully understand this limitation at first, or refused to accept it. A species that cannot reproduce cannot sustain itself. The Unity's vision of a superior humanity was biologically terminal, yet the Master pressed forward. Communities were attacked, survivors were captured and dipped into vats of FEV against their will. Some died. Others transformed into super mutants, stripped of prior identity. Unlike Caesar's Legion, which enslaves but leaves biology intact, the Unity erased humanity at the molecular level. There was no consent. The Master's rhetoric framed transformation as salvation. He believed super mutants would be immune to the petty conflicts that plagued humans. They would not compete for resources in the same way. They would not discriminate. They would simply exist, unified. But in erasing individuality, the Master erased choice. The Unity represents a different kind of horror than factions driven by profit or conquest. It is rooted in misguided idealism, The Master did not see himself as villain. He saw himself as humanity's final hope. This conviction made him dangerous. Unlike the Enclave, which despised wastelanders as impure, the Master sought to include everyone forcibly. His solution to division was assimilation. And assimilation was mandatory. The Unity's operations centered around the cathedral and the Mariposa military base. These locations became centers of mutation and indoctrination. Human captives were processed systematically. The supermutants created under the Master were loyal and powerful. Some retained fragments of memory, others lost themselves entirely. The sterility of the mutants introduced tragedy into the equation. The Master's plan would inevitably collapse under its own biological impossibility. When confronted with evidence of this flaw in the original Fallout, the Master experiences a moment of realization. For a brief time, doubt penetrates his certainty, and doubt breaks him. This moment is critical because it distinguishes the Unity from other factions. Unlike the Enclave's President Eden, who refuses to reconsider extermination, the Master can be reasoned with briefly. His plan was monstrous, but not rooted in malice. It was rooted in despair. He believed humanity would destroy itself again unless fundamentally altered. The Unity's horror lies in its elimination of consent and identity. Transformation was not optional, it was imposed. Unlike the Institute's synth replacements, which mimic humanity, the Unity's super mutants replaced humanity openly. The Master's voice, layered, echoing, distorted, reinforces the faction's unsettling presence. He speaks calmly, almost soothingly, about unity and evolution. There is no rage in his tone, only conviction. The super mutants under his command vary in intelligence. Some, like Lieutenant and later Marcus in Fallout 2 and New Vegas, demonstrate strategic thinking and independence. Others are reduced to brute force. This inconsistency highlights the unpredictability of forced mutation. The Master saw the mutants as uniform successors. In reality, they remained varied individuals trapped in altered bodies. The Unity also introduces one of Fallout's most enduring themes: the danger of grand solutions to complex problems. Human conflict cannot be erased by eliminating humanity itself. The Master's downfall underscores this. When the Mariposa base is destroyed and the cathedral collapses, the Unity fragments. Some super mutants wander aimlessly. Others form independent groups. A few attempt to integrate into human society. The dream of unity dissolves into scattered survivors. And yet, the philosophical shadow remains. The idea that humanity is fundamentally flawed and must be corrected resurfaces repeatedly in Fallout. The Enclave seeks purity. The Institute seeks controlled advancement. Caesar seeks authoritarian order. The Unity was simply the earliest to attempt total redefinition. What makes the Unity especially disturbing is that its premise contains a kernel of truth. Humanity did destroy itself. The Great War was proof. The Master asked a difficult question. If humanity cannot govern itself peacefully, should it remain as it is? His answer was catastrophic. In the end, the Unity stands as a warning about the seductive nature of radical solutions. When faced with overwhelming devastation, it is tempting to believe that incremental change is insufficient. But forced evolution, like forced ideology, erases what it claims to save. And in the echoing chambers of Mariposa, where vats of green FEV once shimmered beneath dim industrial lights, the Unity's legacy lingers as one of Fallout's most unsettling visions. A reminder that sometimes the most disturbing factions are not those who hate humanity, but those who believe it must be remade entirely, no matter the cost. Far from the Mojave's sun-scorched highways and the Commonwealth's shattered skyline lies a place where smoke still rises in thick, choking columns. The Pit, the ruins of Pittsburgh, is not ruled by ideology in the abstract or by ancient philosophy reinterpreted for conquest. It is ruled by industry. And industry, in the hands of the wrong leader, becomes something deeply disturbing. The Pit, introduced in Fallout 3's DLC of the same name, is controlled by a raider faction led by a man known as Asher. Unlike many raider groups, Asher's faction does not thrive solely on chaos. It thrives on labor. Forced labor. Before the war, Pittsburgh was a steel manufacturing hub. After the bombs fell, it became a toxic wasteland plagued by radiation, industrial waste, and a degenerative condition known as the troglodyte disease, which slowly transforms its victims into feral, mutated creatures called trogs. Into this environment stepped Asher, a former member of the Brotherhood of Steel. Asher was captured and enslaved during a mission to the Pit. Over time, he rose through the ranks of his captors, eventually overthrowing them and seizing control of the city. His vision was not anarchy, it was reconstruction. Asher believes the Pit can be rebuilt into a functioning industrial center capable of producing steel once more. In his mind, industry equals survival. If the Pit can produce steel, it can trade. If it can trade, it can stabilize. If it can stabilize, it can thrive. But to achieve this vision, he uses slaves. The majority of the Pit's population consists of enslaved workers forced to toil in factories under brutal conditions. They labor in toxic air. They suffer from disease. They are beaten for insubordination. Asher frames this as necessity. The wasteland is harsh. Resources are scarce. Rebuilding civilization requires sacrifice. In his rhetoric, temporary cruelty is justified by long-term progress. This logic echoes the Institute's utilitarianism and Caesar's authoritarianism, but in the Pit, it feels more grounded and immediate. The slaves are not abstract variables. They are visible, exhausted, chained. Unlike the Legion, which uses slavery as cultural foundation, the Pit uses it as industrial fuel. Asher's faction is organized and disciplined. Raiders patrol the streets in structured units. Production quotas are enforced. Weapons and armor are manufactured locally. The Pit is not chaotic. It is efficient. This efficiency makes it more unsettling than scattered raider camps. The system functions. Slavery is institutionalized, and at the center of it all is Asher's belief that he is doing the right thing. The moral complexity of the Pit lies in Asher's personal circumstances. His wife, Sandra, works tirelessly to develop a cure for the troglodyte disease. Their infant daughter, Marie, appears immune to the disease, a potential breakthrough in genetic resistance. Asher believes that maintaining control over the Pit is necessary to fund and protect this research. In his view, if the Pit collapses into chaos, any hope of curing the disease vanishes, but that cure is pursued atop a foundation of suffering. The enslaved population, represented by figures like Werner, sees Asher not as visionary, but as tyrant. They endure beatings, forced labor, and exposure to toxic environments without assurance of eventual freedom. When the lone wanderer arrives in the Pit, they are confronted with a choice: side with Asher and his vision of industrial rebirth, or support the slave rebellion seeking immediate liberation. Neither path is clean. If the slaves overthrow Asher, the city may descend into instability. The research into curing the disease may falter. Industry may collapse. If Asher remains in power, slavery continues. This moral ambiguity distinguishes the pit from factions driven by pure ideology. Asher does not preach racial supremacy. He does not seek global domination. He seeks steel. He believes production is the path to survival. The pit's aesthetic reinforces this tension. The skyline is dominated by smokestacks. Molten metal glows in furnaces. The air feels heavy. Industry persists in a world where most factories lie silent. But at what cost? The troglodyte disease adds another layer of horror. Slaves who work too long without treatment eventually deteriorate into trogs, feral creatures driven by aggression. This transformation is not metaphorical, it is biological. Workers literally degrade under the system that exploits them. Assure's defenders argue that someone must rebuild, that harsh measures are unavoidable in a wasteland, that long-term stability requires strong leadership. Critics argue that a civilization built on chains is not worth saving. The pit forces players to confront this dilemma directly, unlike the Enclave's genocidal clarity or the Legion's open brutality. The pit's evil feels pragmatic. It is easier to justify, and that is what makes it dangerous. Asher is not cartoonishly villainous. He speaks calmly about the future. He shows affection for his family. He genuinely believes he is laying the foundation for something better. History is filled with leaders who justified oppression as temporary necessity. The pit mirrors that history. Its Raider faction demonstrates how quickly Reconstruction can become authoritarian when efficiency is prioritized over freedom. The city's economy is simple. Labor produces steel. Steel produces trade. Trade produces power. But labor is coerced. In the smoky depths of the pit's foundries, humanity becomes resource. The Raiders enforce order, not through ideology alone, but through routine violence. Public punishments maintain discipline. Armed patrols prevent escape. And yet, compared to random Raider chaos, the pit feels stable. That stability tempts compromise. The lone wanderer's involvement does not erase the moral grayness. No ending resolves the tension fully. If Asher's regime survives, slavery persists, perhaps with incremental reform, perhaps not. If the slaves win, freedom is immediate, but uncertain. The pit stands apart from other disturbing factions because it presents cruelty wrapped in productivity. It asks a quiet question. If suffering rebuilds society faster, is it justified? Fallout consistently suggests the answer is no, but the pit complicates that certainty. Asher's steel mills glow against the night, symbolizing hope forged from ruin. Yet beneath that glow lie chains and scars. And in the echoing clang of hammers striking molten metal, the pit's Raider regime proves that some of Fallout's most disturbing factions are not driven by madness or fanaticism, but by cold calculation, by the belief that civilization can be rebuilt, even if the foundation is made of broken people. Not every disturbing faction in Fallout rules territory. Not all of them march in armor, command armies, or broadcast manifestos about purity or order. Some never leave their laboratories, and yet their impact on the wasteland is catastrophic. The think tank introduced in Fallout, New Vegas, Old World Blues, represents one of the most unsettling kinds of power in the Fallout universe. Intelligence unrestrained by empathy. The think tank resides in Big MT, Big Mountain Research and Development Center, a pre-war scientific complex sealed off from the outside world. The members of the think tank were once human scientists, brilliant and ambitious. Over time, they removed their own brains and placed them into floating cybernetic jars connected to robotic bodies. They eliminated their need for flesh. They eliminated aging. They eliminated vulnerability. But in doing so, they also eliminated perspective. The think tank consists of Dr. Klein, Dr. Boris, Dr. Dalla, Dr. 8, and Dr. O, each representing a different scientific specialization: robotics, biology, psychoanalysis, engineering. Individually, they are brilliant. Collectively, they are catastrophic. Unlike the Institute, which justifies its actions with long-term human benefit, the think tank no longer even pretends to operate for humanity's sake. They conduct experiments because experimentation is what they do. They have forgotten why. Big MT is filled with evidence of their unchecked research. Cyberdogs roaming freely, robotic scorpions patrolling craters, biological abominations stitched together in labs. Entire regions are contaminated with experimental weaponry and unstable technologies. The think tank does not govern Big MT. It tinkers with it. One of the most chilling aspects of the think tank is its detachment from consequences. When experiments go wrong, and they often do, the response is not reflection, it is curiosity. Failure becomes data. During Old World Blues, the courier encounters the think tank and learns that many of the wasteland's horrors can be traced back to their research. Night Stalkers, hybrids of rattlesnakes and coyotes, were created in their labs. Cybernetic animals were designed and discarded. Sonic weaponry and environmental manipulation technologies were tested without ethical oversight. Big MT functioned as a sandbox. The Great War did not stop their research. In many ways, it liberated them. With no oversight, no funding committees, no public scrutiny, the think tank continued experimenting indefinitely. Their brains, suspended in jars, are insulated from physical sensation. They no longer feel hunger, pain, or exhaustion. Without those sensations, empathy weakens. Their conversations are erratic and comedic at times, but beneath the absurdity lies something deeply unsettling. They refer to living beings as specimens. They discuss lobotomizing subjects casually. They debate the merits of replacing organs as if discussing spare parts. Humanity becomes a component. One of the central mechanics of Old World Blues involves the courier's own brain being removed and stored by the think tank. The player navigates Big MT without their brain temporarily, highlighting the faction's willingness to experiment on sentient beings without consent. Consent does not factor into their decisions. The think tank differs from Vault-Tec in that its experiments are not premeditated social designs. They are impulsive, driven by intellectual curiosity. Curiosity without boundaries becomes dangerous. In many ways, the think tank is what the Institute could become if it abandoned its pretense of societal reconstruction entirely. They do not seek to rule. They seek to understand, even if understanding requires dismantling the world. The sink, the courier's base in Big MT, provides a stark contrast. It is composed of anthropomorphic appliances with personality modules. Even these machines display more grounded awareness than the think tank scientists. This inversion emphasizes how far removed the think tank has drifted from humanity. Their speech patterns are grandiose. They refer to themselves as visionaries and pioneers, yet they are trapped in an echo chamber, repeating experiments without clear goals. Dr. Boris, responsible for creating cyberdogs, speaks proudly of his successes, ignoring the suffering inflicted. Dr. Klein postures as a commanding intellect while failing to comprehend basic reality shifts. They are brilliant and broken. What makes the think tank particularly disturbing is that they are not malicious in the traditional sense. They are not driven by hatred or desire for domination. They simply do not care. The moral framework that would prevent them from creating abominations has eroded. Big MT itself reflects this detachment. The environment is warped by scientific tampering. Weather patterns shift artificially. Test chambers are scattered across cratered landscapes. It feels less like a settlement and more like an unfinished experiment. Unlike Caesar's Legion, which enforces order, or the Enclave, which enforces purity, the think tank enforces nothing. They observe, they modify, they discard, and when confronted by the courier, they struggle to comprehend why their actions might be wrong. That ignorance is haunting. In Fallout's world, many factions justify cruelty through ideology or survival. The think tank does not even bother with justification. Experimentation is purpose enough. Their immortality, achieved through brain preservation, removes urgency. They can continue indefinitely. No aging leader to replace, no succession crisis, just endless curiosity. The courier's choices in Old World blues can influence whether the think tank is contained or continues operating unchecked. But even in containment, their legacy persists. Night Stalkers roam the Mojave. Cybernetic technology spreads. Weapons developed in Big MT find their way into the hands of other factions. The think tank may not march across the wasteland, but its fingerprints are everywhere. In the sterile halls of Big MT, where brains float in nutrient solutions and robotic claws assemble creatures never meant to exist, the think tank embodies one of Fallout's most chilling truths. Intelligence alone does not ensure wisdom, and when knowledge advances without restraint, without empathy, without accountability, it becomes something as destructive as any army, proving that some of the most disturbing factions are not conquerors or tyrants, but scientists who forgot to ask whether they should and focused only on whether they could.